Hey everyone, today I'm taking a look at Carnegie, which is a 1-to-4 player board game designed by Javier Jorge. This one takes around 2 hours to play on average. So Carnegie is actually one of my most anticipated games for 2022 because not only am I a big fan of Javier Jorge, I tend to like Quinid games, and I also really like economic style games, and that is what this game is all about. So you are trying to get as many victory points as you can by building networks in the city, by just building in the cities in the first place, by climbing tracks, and also by making donations on this top part of the board here. Now I have only set up with one player piece here, or at least one colour of player, but I don't think I really need to show all the other pieces to give you an idea about how the game actually works. But normally you'd have certain spots blocked off if you are playing with a lower player count. So in addition to the main board itself, you have a little action board here which determines the pace of the game. So the game is going to play out over 20 rounds exactly, and each time you choose a round you are going to be moving one of these markers along to show the progress of the game. And more importantly, each player has their own individual player board that looks like this, by this kind of side-on office block, and you're going to start with a number of workers on these different departments. You can see here that all these different squares have a different number of seats on them and an associated action. And you also have a lobby in the bottom here, which is your kind of spawning spot where you take in new workers and where you bring back workers when you send them on a mission to the main board. Now each player is also going to have a bunch of their coloured discs, some more meeples that you can unlock. If you're playing with above 2 players, you take one of these kind of wild action tokens, which means you can kind of override the action that was selected, and it gives you 3 points at the end of the game if you didn't use that. And you're also going to start with some basic money and these cube resources. So how does the game actually work? So the first thing you're going to do, the first player is going to choose which of the 4 different action types you are going to take. So you've got these human resource actions, you've got these management actions, you've got construction actions, and you've got research and development actions. And you can see from your player board, each of the different departments associates to one of those actions, meaning that if that action is selected, you get to activate all the departments of that type. And for each meeple you have standing up on a desk or a workstation, you can take that action. So you can actually do the same action multiple times if you have the capacity to do so. But before you actually take the associated action and activate all these buildings or departments, you are going to take the action associated to the spot you move to next. So let's just say, someone did take this human resource actions. You are going to cover up the next spot with this cog token. And all these different spots have different parts on the board covered. So you can see here, this one's west, which will mean that it will activate the west area here. And the same goes to the south, the east, and also the Midwest. And whenever an action lands on this one here, each player is going to have the option to make a donation to these spots here. And now each donation is going to increase in costs. So the first one's going to be £5, and it's going to go all the way up to dollars. Now each one's going to increase by 5, and they're going to be things to invest in for endgame points. So you can see things here. For each department you buy, you get a point, or maybe for each time you get to the train section on these upgrade tracks, then you're going to get 3 points. Or even 2 points for each donation you make. Another point for every worker you have left standing on your departments at the end of the game, or even for discs you have in all the different regions. Now, once one of these location spots have been triggered, then again, you are going to look at the particular region. And if you have any meeples in that zone, which I'll talk about how you get them there in the first place shortly, you have the option to remove a meeple. And for each meeple you remove, you'll be taken income depending on how far you are up on the corresponding track. So initially, every spot is only worth $1 for each meeple you remove, but you can increase it up to $3 or taking resource cubes, victory points, getting R&D actions, and so on, depending on the region you're in. So once the first player has selected the action, you've taken the location action or the donation action, then you are going to have the ability to activate every single department of that matching type. So you can see here, this human resource action, I've only got one type at the moment, and you've always got like a default meeple on that spot. And that means that you can move meeples up to 3 spots for each person you have here. So at the moment, I've only got one there, again, that proxy one, or I can move up to three spaces, and I can divide that out how I like. So let's just say I wanted to move another meeple over here. And maybe I wanted to move one up here to take more construction actions. Now, when you move them, they automatically become exhausted and lie down, meaning that you cannot use them immediately. However, you can pay them later in order to get them occupying these workstations, or even getting them for free. The management action here corresponds to these two basic buildings, or two departments, and the first of which is to just gain 3 money or a resource cube, or the second of which is to send somebody on a mission and get 6 money or 2 resource cubes. Now, when you do that, obviously you're going to get a much better benefit for doing so, but again, you have to send them off to a different location, meaning that you'll probably get them back when a corresponding action is taken from the main board here. The second of these management buildings is to buy new departments for your office block. So basically they work in a very simple way. So you can either spend 2 resource cubes from your supply and have your choice of any of these upgraded departments, and these do slightly improved versions than your basic ones, such as giving you more R&D points, or making it cheaper for you to make donations. I'm giving you an additional lobby so you can move your things around the building a lot quicker and more efficiently, or even just trading in cubes for money. And when you take one of these buildings, or departments, you're going to place it where you want on your little office block. But depending on where you put it, you're going to get a number of endgame points. And the further away you put it, as in the top row, you're going to get even more points. And that is because it's going to take a lot more effort to move your meeples to that spot, because it's going to cost you a lot more movement points. Now, the second option, this one here, which only costs you 1 resource cube, is if you had somebody already moved to that department. So let's just say earlier I spent a human resource action to move this guy here, and then I built the department on top of him, then that only actually cost me 1 resource cube because that guy is already there, ready and waiting. The construction action here lets you spend either 1 or 2 resource cubes, depending on the type of disc you want to put down. So you can see here, these two cost 2 resource cubes, but these bottom 2 only cost 1. And when you pay that corresponding amount of resource cubes, you're going to take the corresponding marker. So let's just say I spent 1 cube to place this money marker out, and I can put it anywhere on the map as long as it is a money token on it, like so. Now that is important because all the different cities are going to be worth a number of points, or you can even take income when you place it immediately. But the goal of you trying to basically build on the map here is not only to place more discs down, which I'll explain the relevance of shortly, but also because you are aiming to build a network between the major cities based on this chart here. So you can see all the major cities have a kind of link number on them. So this one's got a 1, New Orleans down here has also got a 1, meaning that if I combine those two by the end of the game, that would be a chain value of 2, and then I would correspond that to how well I've climbed up those tracks. So you can see here, if I got them both in the train icon section of that track, then I would times the 2 by the train bit here to get a total of 9 points. And of course, there's a massive potential to get a bunch of points if you manage to connect multiple cities and get all those tracks upgraded. But additionally, as you put more discs down onto the board, you're going to start unlocking income. So not only when you return your workers to your lobby, you are going to get this income as well as the income from the upgrade tracks. And the final type of action is the R&D action, the research and development action. And that is where you are going to upgrade your ability to do different things. So you can see here, every one of these different sections on these tracks here requires a number of R&D points to climb up it. So let's just say I had 4 R&D points. I could move 1 up here. So when I return workers from that section, I'll now get $2 per worker. But also, you can see that all these different cogs on the side of my player board have numbers on them as well. So I could spend additional R&D points to slide these along and upgrade further discs to put down. And when I ever reveal a new circle, I have to place a disc on it immediately because I haven't actually, built that one yet, but I now have the potential to build it. And as you develop more and more and more, you might get them all the way out here and start unlocking victory points. Okay, so let's talk about my thoughts on Carnegie. So first up, I really enjoy this kind of spatial puzzle and all the different actions you have to juggle by upgrading and moving meeples around your own personal office block. And because there's always a moving and shifting space, because you're always sending people off on missions, and doing that is a good thing because it means that if you've climbed up and spent effort to climb these tracks, then you can potentially get a lot of income in terms of points, money, or resource cubes by doing so. But when you have more things on the main board, it means you're probably taking weaker actions when it comes to resolving the second part of the round and taking the action itself, because again, the more people you have on the main board, the less people you're going to have on your personal board, and vice versa. And where these workers are actually sat is so important, because you don't want to overinvest into departments when you haven't got the actual ability to utilize that. Or maybe you've overinvested in having everyone here in the human resources section and you've got no desire to shift anything around anytime soon. Or maybe you've maxed out all of your R&D points for a long time, or you're satisfied where you are and you just got people sat here not really paying dividends. So again, you want to balance getting the resource cubes, you want to balance getting new departments in, you want to balance the ability to shift them around the board, and of course actually get an income of money by doing so. So there's a lot of things to juggle here, and I kind of like the way you have to map things out, the way you have to keep money back at the end of the round in order to stand your workers up, because again, if they're lying down on a section after you've moved them, they're useless. You only have to pay them to actually get them in a working position, and doing that can end up costing quite a bit of money if you are consistently shifting things around your player board. So a big part of this game is the way that you interact with the other players, and it's not such in a more direct way. It's more kind of aligned with something like Puerto Rico, where you have to be aware of the current condition and situation of your opponents, because you want to be activating certain actions when you know that your opponents aren't in such a strong position to utilize that or to piggyback off your choice. Alternatively, you want to be making sure that you are triggering their locations when you have a bunch of meeples there and your opponents don't. And the same even goes for the donations, where, maybe if you have a bunch of money, you're in a great position to make a new donation and you've caught everybody else off guard where they're going to miss out on that opportunity. And the same applies to your personal player board as well, because maybe you've invested in a ton of the same type of department, and when somebody selects that particular action, you're going to get a hell of a lot more return from doing that. But maybe you haven't got the meeples in the right departments when that action is activated, so therefore you've been caught off guard and you're not going to get much return from it. So again, you always have to be looking over your shoulder and looking at the boards of other people to make sure that you're getting the kind of net gain over them. I do really enjoy the way that these investments work, or these donations work, by basically, investing in your endgame scoring. And that's a novel concept, and it means you can really tailor your own strategy at any point in the game, really. Maybe you're going to get your disc down on these spots and then start building towards that strategy, or maybe you've just naturally formed something's developed during the game and then you invested in it afterwards. And there's quite a tight competition to get to the different locations. Maybe you're going for the same same type of strategy as somebody else's, so you want to be making sure that you're triggering that investment stage when you're in a position to pay for it and maybe your competition is not. So again, I like the way this works. There is a slight issue I have with it when you're playing with lower player counts, because there's quite a hefty amount of these spots blocked off and they're not going to be even starters before the game begins. There's no option to go there at all, and I think that's somewhat limiting on what you can do, and it feels a bit frustrating when maybe again naturally things play out. There's just a no-brainer investment there for you to take, but just by the luck of the draw, it's been covered up by one of the default player markers. The synergy between the income, the construction, and the R&D points, I think, is great. That's a very well blended bunch of mechanisms. You want to get the discs down in order to increase your income, but in order to get more discs down, you're going to have to invest in the R&D points to pull more of these strips out and get more discs into your fold to put on the board in the first place. So again, a very well harmonized bunch of mechanisms there, and they all tie hand in hand in a very smooth way. I think the weakest part of the game for me is the actual route building factor, where again you are just trying to place your disc on the board and connect these major cities together, or get the points from the cities themselves as you go. It just feels a little bit generic for me, and it seems like there's 20 or 30 other Euro games that do pretty much the exact same thing. Nothing new or innovative here. The scoring you get at the end of the game by connecting those chains and multiplying them by how far you've climbed those tracks kind of feels a little bit wonky for me. Yeah, it is something to aim towards in terms of, you know, long-term strategy, but still I didn't find it terribly fun or interesting. Now, something that quite surprised me in a positive way about Carnegie was how easy this game is to learn and teach and actually play, because it is actually quite a relatively heavy and complex game. But when you get into it, the actual mechanisms are ultra simple. You know, just select one of these and take the corresponding actions, you know, activating your departments. But there is still a lot of decision within that framework. But I really did find this quite intuitive. There really isn't that many fiddly or complicated rules. And I think if you're even, you know, vaguely familiar with how Euros work, it's not going to take you very long to find your feet. Now, I will say one thing that left me a little bit deflated was these additional buildings. Now, I thought this was going to be a massive part of the game, you know, getting these upgraded buildings. I thought they were going to be much more powerful and more significant than what they actually are. Now, don't get me wrong, these are an absolute necessity because, again, they do make you more efficient, they do make you better, but they do feel like slight tweaks on the kind of bare bones basics that you start with. They just didn't do anything massively creative or, you know, coming out of the blue or getting out of the box that made me think, I really want that department more than anything else. It just seems like, yeah, that one's slightly better than what I have, or that one's slightly better. And again, there was nothing really to excite me to think that next time I'm trying this one because I want to see how that works. I also feel like early in the game, you know, the front half of the game, it does feel like you're jumping through a lot of hoops to get a little back in return. So normally you'll probably choose some of your more powerful actions, such as, you know, the ones that send the workers off on missions, because you're going to get a lot more money or more resource cubes for doing so. But when you activate these regions, you're only going to get, you know, 1 or 2 meeples back, and you're going to get a dollar or two for doing so. And, you know, and then they go back to your lobby, and then you have to spend the, you know, the movement points to move them back into position. Again, it feels like you're going through the motions and jumping through hoops, and it feels like a bit of a chore at times. You can clearly tell that this game has been very well thought out. It's well balanced. You know, all the different strategies seem equally as strong, in my opinion. And it does what it's supposed to do mechanically. There's no glaringly obvious faults here. There's a good synergy of mechanisms, and, you know, it's rock solid, you know, as I would expect with a designer of this pedigree. But despite that, I did kind of leave the game feeling there was nothing distinct about this. There's nothing unique and make me think that, you know, Carnegie is the game that does this. Carnegie is the game that makes me feel this way. And I think more, you know, the more and more games I play, that's become quite a strong thing that I need in my collection, because, yeah, there's a ton of heavier games out there. There's a ton of competition for every type of game you want out there, but there needs to have a unique hook about it. And there's nothing here that makes me think, you know, this is what this game is all about. Now, the game length is actually something that surprised me, particularly at 2 players. Because you are always playing 20 rounds exactly, you do kind of have a fixed point that you know you are going to play for, which is a nice feature, I think. And when you are playing with 2 players who are quite familiar with Euro mechanisms, I don't think they're going to find this too hard to grasp, and turns can actually be quite rapid, even considering you are activating quite a few buildings, you know, by the end of the game than you were, you know, at the start of the game. So I think with 2 players, you can actually get this done quite comfortably in about 100 minutes or so, which I think is more than fair for a game of this weight. Another thing that slightly concerns me is the replayability factor, or lack thereof. Yeah, there are a ton of different strategies you can go for in terms of the endgame scoring. There are a bunch of different buildings, and you're not going to get them all every game. And there is additional content as well if you have the, you know, deluxe Kickstarter version. But that being said, kind of going back to my earlier point, I didn't really feel that, you know, that hook or that lure to go and try all the different strategies. It seems like you pretty much do the same thing each time, just have slightly different variants or, you know, slight tweaks on what you did the last time, and of course reacting to the actions that the other people have chosen. Now, one thing that I cannot fault about this game is the production value and artwork. I mean, this is right on the money on where it needs to be in terms of the way it's been produced. All the artwork looks great. It looks crisp. The symbology is razor sharp. Next to no confusion on what everything does. You've got your traditional Euro meeples and discs, which look great. You know, these are screen printed as well. The artwork of the characters here looks great with this Ian O'Toole artwork. All the different these different like hexes that you have to show the actions, and there's variable player strips here so that each game you're playing a different kind of formation. It all snaps together very well. Even the little kind of sundry things like these cogs, this is a really hefty metal piece. One of my favourite things about this game in terms of the production is the game boards themselves. These look fantastic. I love the way that everything kind of harmonises with the background as you're creating more and more different office blocks and switching the lights on, the way that you can shift things around. And these little cog strips here actually slip inside of the player boards, so they're not going to get lost or move at all. And these storage trays for each player are absolutely fantastic. They store everything you need it to store, and they do a great job of helping you set up the game a lot quicker. You can see here how it's presented to each player. You've got a nice snug lid there. It stores all your kind of action strips, all your meeples, all your money, your starting cubes, and everything you need just for a very quick distribution. Okay, so let's get into my final thoughts on Carnegie. So as I said at the start of the video, this was actually probably in my top 5, maybe even top 3 most anticipated games of 2022. And I have to say I was left feeling a little bit deflated and a little bit underwhelmed. Now, not in any way because this game is bad. It's not. It works perfectly smoothly. It's mechanically sound. It's well balanced. And there is some good decisions here, especially when it comes to the management of your personal player board. But I must admit, I never really felt any highs or lows when playing this game. It wasn't terribly tense. Yeah, there is some pretty interesting interaction when people select things that you're not prepared for, and you need to make sure you have contingencies, when donations are being made and stuff like that. So there is some good money management here. But again, I did feel like this game lacks something special. It lacks that unique selling point to make it stand out amongst the crowd. So while I like the game, I don't think it's going to hold up with other games of this type. You've got some really amazing medium to medium heavy economic simulators out there. And this one is quite low on that totem pole. Again, I don't want this to sound overly negative because, again, it is a sound game and I know a lot of people are enjoying it. And again, I did enjoy the game, but I was expecting this one to be like a 9 or 10 out of 10, and it ended up being like, a 6 or a 7 for me. I don't think every single, Euro-style gamer or people who enjoy economic games are going to be blown away with it, because I just feel like it's been done better in other games, and it just felt a little bit generic despite having some cool ideas. And sadly, that's where I left. That's my lasting impression. So those are my final thoughts on Carnegie.